JJ the CPA here with Anshul, my great friend. We have put together this podcast called Inspire. And what we want to do is inspire you if you're considering becoming a CPA. We want to inspire you if you are a CPA and you're trying to figure out how do we ensure that our profession survives over the next 75 years to come when we look back at the rich history that we have. So with that, we want to talk about a number of issues. Today, we're going to focus in on what type of guests do we want to have on. But before we do that, Anshul, welcome. Thank you for joining me in this effort. I know I'm joining you, you're joining me, but this collaborative effort to inspire folks worldwide.
Absolutely, JJ. It's an absolute honor to work with you, to be on this podcast with you. It's very refreshing to meet people who are as optimistic as you, as motivated as you. So love the energy. And as you were making that introduction, I was like, man, I need to be more like him. I need to learn. I need to get that charisma. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, you're very, very kind. You know, what really got me inspired to want to connect with Anshul, and he has a separate podcast with his company, June 15 Consulting, that I've been on. Definitely should check out that podcast with the multiple guests that he has on. But what I really felt that Anshul was bringing to the table is that he's actually bringing connection. He's actually bringing resources. He's providing solutions, and he's doing it in a way that I find quite unusual, but is a wonderful match for the CPA mind. And right now we know that when we are talking about those in the US that are seeking to, quote unquote, find offshore help, if you will, meaning having CPAs in other countries help those CPAs and CPA firms here in the US, many, many times it's going through an agency. And while there's a lot of advantages to that, so definitely not knocking it in any way, a lot of CPAs, when considering this, go, you know what, though? I'm going through a third party, and this CPA or this workforce that's helping me is then not directly working for me. And so part of what Anshul's put together is a direct ownership, a direct way to not only bring together those that have the talents that are outside, let's say, of the borders of the US, but doing it in a way that the CPA, and just as it says, direct ownership, but has a direct link in that those CPAs and that workforce is working directly with the CPA firm and just not a middle person in between. And that speaks, I think, volumes to CPAs in a solution that makes sense to them. And so what I want to really talk about today is what kind of guests do we want to have on? And from our perspective, we're very, very lucky, Anshul. You know, you grew up in India, you're in Toronto now, you have a presence all over the US. I would say June 15 Consulting is truly an international company in terms of bringing people across the globe together. You're doing such a great job with that. But when you're now looking to bring guests on to Inspire, what we have the advantage of is that you have many long-time connections and resources and friends that are in the CPA industry over in India. And we know there are other countries that will be bringing to the table here with guests, hopefully. But when you're now looking at bringing some guests on that are in the profession, that are in India, what is it that you feel we'll be looking forward to in terms of the guests and what they're going to be bringing to the table in future episodes?
I think one of the first things that we talked about in the last episode was we don't want to bring guests that have an agenda. We don't want to bring guests who are trying to promote something of their own. But we don't want to bring guests who don't really have experience working with global talent and who have opinions. While those opinions are fine, like our purpose is to educate and inspire through education, right? So I would love to bring guests like people who you would actually work with if you were to go to India, right? So for example, a recruiter, right? You'll need a recruiter to bring on some new employees. So rather than bringing somebody who is an expert in the industry, we'll bring the actual recruiter you're going to work with, right? So you can see what that person sounds like, how they'll find you candidates, what kind of challenges you'll face. So things like that. Like we would also want to bring, I would love to talk to some newly minted CPAs in India. We should talk to them about why did they become a US CPA? Why did they not go the India CA route? So, I mean, I think they can inspire people over here as well. Because if somebody thousands of miles away is seeing an opportunity in becoming a CPA, surely somebody who's already here, who has the benefit of, being local, right? I mean, they benefit so much more from getting those three letters, getting that designation. So that's sort of my thought of, those are the kinds of gets I would want to bring.
Yeah, and from the American side, kind of to your point, is bringing those that are doing this. They're involved in it, or maybe going through with a guest that is somebody that's working with June 15 Consulting, because I'm sure they're going to have a process that they went through in determining if this was going to be an option for them. And so I think when we're now trying to educate those that are tuning in, we're not educating in terms of statistics. And I wouldn't even say we're educating in really an agenda. What we're trying to do is be positive, inspire. That's what this whole podcast is about. And I look forward to the guests that you bring on, because some of the questions that I want to ask them is really some of the concerns that we're hearing. And it's not that the concerns that we hear from American CPAs are not well founded. It's not that they're not well thought out. It's not that they're all negative, but I think most of the time these objections are really without true information. And so if we're bringing now those that are actually involved in this, not talking heads, not influencers that have gained an opinion, that don't seem to really be involved with this. They're just reporting on it, if you will. We want to bring those. And I will tell you this, I really look forward to having those that are like in the process of becoming a US CPA in India, or just to your point, recently became, to hear the why and what challenges they had, because it's the same challenges that we have here. And you talked about it in episode 1 that really there's a pride that those that get that CPA have in that trek, that accomplishment, not just in the US, but for those to see that, wow, so here in the US, I was on this quest, or I was able to achieve this. I've been in the profession, and I'm kind of hearing the same things from another person just because they're not in the US. It still sounds very familiar to my journey. I think also there's also maybe a misconception of offshore. I've heard that, oh, well, this is all about finding cheaper labor, or this is offshoring jobs. And all I would say related to that is that it is a fact that there are more open positions in the CPA profession than there are CPAs to fill it. Meaning, when you talk with somebody, and we will have these kind of guests on, that they are looking to hire 3 people that are CPAs that have experience, most of them simply cannot find any, or they can only find one. And so we're not offshoring jobs, I don't think, when American CPAs are looking to countries like India to have them help. There is no help here. There's not enough help here, especially as we have CPAs retiring and we're losing that workforce. So they're filling a need. Second, in terms of cheaper labor, well, this is all about the power of the US dollar, or really just the exchange
Yeah.
of it. And us being able to have a guest on to say, okay, so what is it that you're being paid, and showing what the equivalent of is for the US dollar, and then what it is. Because, when you and I were in New York, you were showing me pictures of some that you have been able to help connect with US CPA firms, and how it's been life changing when you now look and you say, well, how much are they being paid? The dollar amount, if you go, well, we should be paying them what we would pay somebody in the US, it would be astronomically inappropriate in some regards, if I could say that, in terms of you're trying to match up a cost of living. And when people say, oh, well, you can't fill jobs because you're not paying enough, and you should pay more, and therefore you're wanting to pay less and go into other countries. What we're going to bring there is information, education, but now talking to people that have actually been involved in it versus just somebody that's providing their opinion related to it. So I'm super excited about us having these guests on that provide this information. I think we talked about it in the first episode, but I believe what the saying goes is, for me to be understood, I first must understand. And that requires asking questions and listening and hearing. And after that, if we find that, those that are opposed to the US CPA being outside of the borders. Okay, I mean, it is what it is, but at least we're trying to provide some information, some education, so that people are able to maybe better formulate opinions related to this. And what we're wanting to do is maybe change the conversation from not, it seems as though majority, if I just look online, is more from a negative, it's more from a defensive, it's more, I dare say, discriminatory, even though I hate to use that word. But when you see some of the language being used, I think it then creates divide. And really that hurts us. And that's again why we are calling this podcast Inspire. We want to come from a positive direction related to this. So, Anshul, we need to wrap up here, but share a little bit more, because I talked about your company, June 15 Consulting. I talked about how when we were in New York, you gave me some specific examples, but to give somebody a taste of some of the things that we were talking about, maybe share a story of working with a US CPA firm that maybe was resistant, maybe some of what they were resistant to, but then when you broke through, how everybody was so blessed by this, if I can use that word, was so positive in terms of, wow, we finally have help. We can meet clients' needs. We can do it with then the quality. And then, wow, we really are changing lives for those that then became a CPA and now have that opportunity to put it into action.
Yeah, so I'll share a couple of stories. Like one of my clients, when I had my first meeting with them, right, it was with the partners and their senior executives. And the meeting was like all doom and gloom, right? They mentioned that they've had positions open for months. And the trigger for them to think about going to India was they got the same resume twice. So they're like, have we gone through every accountant in America that we're seeing resumes again? And what I've seen in most firms is it's usually a couple of at least one or two partners are pro offshoring and one or two are against. So it's really, I've never come across a firm that was all pro global talent or all against. It is usually one or two people who are like, let's do this. This is great. And then the others are like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to my data, all of those things. So when we had that first meeting, right? So it was so clear to me that there were two people who were asking a lot of questions coming from a place of being scared or not wanting to do this. And the other people asking questions were about coming more from a place of this is going to work. So the questions were like from one side, how do we make sure that our client's data is secure? Very good question, right? How do we make sure that we're able to explain this to our clients so that they don't judge us or they don't leave us for somebody else, right? And on the other side, that's pro, their questions were more about, all right, so let's talk about like compensation. Like, how do we make sure we pay them well while making sure that we're getting some savings? How do we make sure that, we get them the benefits they want? How do we make sure we learn their culture? So you get questions from both sides. And the answer really is education, right? I answered every question, educated them on it. And it helped that I am Indian. It helped that I live in Canada, so I understand both worlds. So we went through this for several rounds, and eventually they were like, all right, we'll do this, but we don't, as you said, we don't want to go through an agency. And the idea there was that we want more control, but also we don't want the India team to be separate than us. So if there's someone in the middle, right, we're not going to have that direct relationship, right? Even if I train them, even if they work exclusively for me, in the end, I can't take them. If I decide to change vendors, I can't take those people with me, which means they're not my people. So find a way for us to have a team in India that's ours. And this was a mid-sized firm, right? Small to mid-sized. So they didn't have the kind of global exposure that like a big 20 firm would have. So I worked with them to figure out this model of direct ownership. Like they get as much credit as I do for it. And the last meeting that I had with them, right, after 2 years of them being in India, their tone changed from we can't find people, we're turning away business. Now they're like, well, how about we offer bookkeeping to our clients? They've been asking for it. It wasn't profitable for us before, but now with this India team, we can actually do it. Now they're thinking, can we also provide IT support? Because we can't hire IT support people in India and we couldn't afford them in the US. Now we can provide more value to our clients. Our clients are also asking us to help with recruiting. Can we hire a recruiter in India? So if they've gone from this place of we're going to die to we're winning. Now, a good byproduct, a surprising byproduct of them going to India for their size, now they're getting called at conferences. Now, bigger firms are like, hey, you guys were so small, but you did it? You have your own office? I mean, it's your team, and you didn't have to pay like millions of dollars for it? How did you do it? Right? So now they've become thought leaders without even trying to do that. So now that's bringing them more business. So, I mean, that's a very good story of how a firm went from, I don't know if you want to do this, to, wow, I can't believe how well this is working. And it wasn't without its challenging, it wasn't without the learning curve. They're still learning, but they're winning. So, I mean, that's a very good story that more accountants need to hear. That it's just, you just need to educate yourself, have an open mind. And in the end, you may decide that this is not for you. That's okay. But you need to take that decision from like a good place with all the right information, as opposed to rumors on or like stuff you read online.
Yeah. Well, and the American Institute of CPAs has the Professional Code of Conduct, and any CPA would be very familiar with that. And one provision is due care. Another provision is integrity. And what we have to remember is that due care, they are talking about our work product. And how much due care do we have if we are short staffed? How much due care do we have if our staff is working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, working 7 days a week? How good is that product when we're having to push those that are here in the US beyond normal capacity, beyond normal work schedule, even though it's become normal that that's how it works in a CPA firm, especially in public and especially in tax. But how good is that product? I mean, if you have a surgeon that is doing surgeries 80 hours a week, 7 days a week, sometimes in the middle of the night, how good is that surgeon? And would you go to that surgeon? And if it wasn't an emergency, the answer would be no. So with this, having a proper workforce is providing, in my opinion, more due care. And then the integrity aspect of it is when we're now working with our clients to give them what it is they're hiring us to do. The integrity, in my opinion, isn't just taking their numbers and putting it on a tax return. If I'm talking about my profession doing taxes, because many times that's really what happens. And because of understaffed and not enough time, not enough CPAs, not enough CPA firms, there are many of those that they just go, well, they don't have any other option, so I guess I'll do it. They think that that's really helping their client, but is it? I've got a book coming out talking about this and my experience in having a stroke, and I used to not do it the right way. We were overworked and understaffed and worked all these hours, and I had probably then some of these same concerns. And so I'm talking about used to do it that way, and providing solutions is what we're talking about. And so with that, I probably think we're a little bit over our time, but I did want you to share. So with that specific story, with that CPA firm that has become, basically a leader in the industry related to this and growing, and in my opinion, now providing more due care and that integrity in what they're doing, helping more people, but in a way that they can handle it. But now talk about those that were filling that workforce need, meaning those that were in India, because I do think, even though this is going to sound silly, I think there are those out there that think that when a CPA is hiring somebody in India, that they're in a sweatshop, that there's basically dirt floors somehow, and these are individuals being taken advantage of, and they're being kept in poverty because they're being paid these low wages compared to quote unquote Americans. And it couldn't be any further from the truth. It's in fact the complete opposite. Part
It's
of the
the
reason you and I wanted
complete
to connect.
opposite. Complete opposite. I'll share three stories, right? I'll talk about the country head for that client. He had a good job. He was getting paid well. But when I approached him, right, I told him, hey, there's this small CPA firm that's coming to India, and I would want you to lead their operation. He was hesitant at first, but we gave him a decent salary bump. But more importantly, we gave him a job that matched his potential. That's a better way to put it. Because this guy, like, he was extremely entrepreneurial, very ambitious. And while he had a good job, like, I could see that he should be doing so much more than he is right now. And if it wasn't for us going there, if it wasn't for this American firm going there, setting up their own office, this person would not have had the opportunity at least in the near future. So when we go there, right, not only did we pay him more than what he was making, but like we gave him his dream job. So if you are an accountant thinking of going to India or any country and you're thinking about, I'm going to be exploiting people, well, don't, right? I mean, in the end, right, it's up to you. And most accounting firms, or I would say all accounting firms, when they go to India, they find people who are either undervalued in their current jobs, who are not getting paid, who are not living up to their full potential, and they give them that platform. So that's a big boost in, I mean, to that person and to their family. It's never like a sweatshop. The second, let's talk about the physical space. Since you brought up sweatshops, right? What we did for this client was I went to their office, I took pictures, and I spoke to the designer, the person who designed their office. And I was like, their India office has to be a replica of their US office. And I challenged the managing partner that the India office is actually going to turn out better than your US office, right? So he's going to say it didn't, but it did. So we rented the space in India, and everything from like the paintings, the furniture, the fixtures, the color of the wall, the branding, everything was exactly the same as the US. So when you are looking and going to India, right? I mean, you're not putting people in a sweatshop, right? It could be the replica of your office, whatever you want it to be. If you have a humble office where you're like, well, I just have the basic stuff, well, then the India office will be a reflection of that stuff. I know I keep saying office, but it doesn't really have to be a big thing. It could be for 2 people, for 3 people. And India has a lot of co-working spaces like WeWorks. Those are like exactly the same as the US, right? It's same infrastructure, same like quality, blazing internet, housekeeping, all of the bells and whistles, right? So that's another option that a lot of CPA firms take. So in no way are your India employees or offshore employees working in a sweatshop. In fact, whatever place you put them in is going to be better than whatever they were working for before. And that's not to take a dig at Indian accounting firms. It's just a different culture, right? Here in the US, we like to make sure we'll even spend a little more to make sure the workspace is just the best. Third thing I want to share. Now, this person was sort of the housekeeping staff for India. So his salary was around, I think, $300 a month. Now, if you tell somebody in the US you're paying a full-time housekeeper or somebody who takes care of the office $300 a month, it sounds like discrimination. It sounds like, what are you doing there? But when we paid him more than his old job, more important than that, he was treated with respect. He was part of the entire team. Like the person who was the country head and this person, they're on the same team. So giving that somebody who's coming from not the best place when it comes to socioeconomic circumstances, giving them money is one thing, but giving them respect, giving them the opportunity to be a part of something bigger, that is even bigger. A lot of times what happens in offshore companies is people would treat their executives really well, but not their lower junior staff, or especially the housekeeping staff. But that's why I love working with accountants, right? There's no discrimination. Now this guy, I think he got salary raises every year. He's making a really good amount of money for the job he's doing. And here's how I know it. He recently bought a car. He bought a used car. He went from not being able to afford a car, not being able to afford even leasing a car, to buying a used car. That is huge. The second thing that has happened, he did not have health insurance. Right now, there's sure the government provides some basic insurance, but that's not adequate. Now he has insurance not just for him, but for his parents as well who are aging. Now, that is the impact you as an accounting firm owner can have in a different country. We talk about countries like India and China bringing people out of poverty. But what does that look like? We're reading stuff, but what does that look like? This is what it looks like, where somebody who wasn't getting paid well is now getting paid their worth, now being treated with respect. They're able to afford a car, or, all right, okay, but health insurance, that is a big deal. So you are literally changing lives. And his salary, I'm not sure what his salary is now, but whatever it is still peanuts compared to what you would pay somebody to clean your office in the US. But it's a big deal in India. It changed his life. So that's a long answer to your short question.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me a story, for somebody that's maybe not even a CPA but is wanting to become one, and in the interim or in preparation, they're a bookkeeper. And you were talking about some specific circumstances that you were involved with, and you said, even at a dollar amount, and correct me if I'm wrong on the dollar amount, but you said even 500 US, okay, not saying that that's what's paid just because that's a minimum. You said even at 500 a month US for a woman that maybe finished up university is now not having to move back home. This is all just part of culture. Doesn't have to move back home with their parents. It gives them more options. It actually makes them more attractive in terms of finding a spouse, if you will. And all that to say, I mean, these are all realities. And if we stop looking at this like we're looking in on a fish tank and we're looking at human beings, what we're talking about here then is if somebody's making 1,500 a month US, but that 1,500 US paid to somebody in India that's now not only moved them out of poverty, but now they're able to have a place of their own. And I'm not talking about a one room apartment that has 14 roommates with them. It all comes down to the dollar. And what's really interesting is that when we're now thinking through what somebody is getting paid, what is important is in their country, in terms of their currency, if you are paying something that puts them in an equivalent position as the US, that's really what's important here. Are
Yep.
they in an equivalent position? And so, even though somebody in the US is quote unquote getting paid here, but they're in an equivalent position, it's just really the same as that if I hire somebody in Oklahoma versus me hiring somebody in New York, I would have to pay somebody more in New York to be the equivalent of what somebody would be able to make here or live off in Oklahoma. That doesn't mean that I'm underpaying or taking advantage of Oklahoma workforce by paying less. What it means is it's a cost of living is way less in Oklahoma as compared to New York. So if I were to go to somebody in New York and say, well, I'm going to just pay you what I'm paying somebody here in Oklahoma, they'd say, no, I'm not going to be able to come work for you. I can't live off of it, or vice versa.
Yep.
So we're already doing this based on the dynamics. Anybody saying otherwise would probably just not be in the know. Well, hey, listen, so I know that we are getting excited because we are talking about inspiring. We're talking about us being involved in these issues. That's why we want to have this conference. We're going to be talking about more as we lead up to the conference, what that entails. We'll be talking in the future about my involvement because we haven't even talked about that yet. My own experience as it relates to this. And that's really what I think is important. So, Angel, very excited, honored to be on this quest of inspiring CPAs and those that are involved in the CPA industry and opening up minds, educating. And so I look forward to our next episode. And with that, our goal is to have a guest with us on our next episode.
Absolutely. I will put together a list of guests and we'll take it from there. But always a pleasure, JJ, talking to you. And thank you for taking this journey.
Absolutely. So, hey, for those that are tuning in, if you have missed any of our podcasts, be sure to check out the link to be watching. And as we move forward, if you are watching one of the podcasts that you have found something of interest, we look forward to in the future having a platform that would maybe give some opportunity for some feedback that we can include in future podcasts. All to say, we are building this as we move along with the end goal of having an Inspire conference in India as well as in the US. And so with that, Angel, I think we're out of here.